Hi there, it's Leslie, and welcome to Ageless Flexibility. When we look at flexibility training, we essentially think that there's dynamic flexibility, there's also static, both of which are beneficial depending on what your goal is. But if you think about creating a conscious movement for a subconscious result, if I were to reach across my body, let's say with my left arm, my left scapula goes forward, but yet my right scapula goes back. And if I look straight ahead at you, then I'm really creating cervical rotation to my left, same as if I were to rotate my head to the left. So in this section today, what we want to think about is the body as a whole, not just as a part. So in other words, if we reach in a certain direction, there's going to be a reaction somewhere else in the body. So for example, let's say you're tight in your shoulder, well, it could be coming from your hip. And these are all caveats to having a better understanding of kind of what's happening when we're trying to design, a flexibility program for ourselves or a client. So let's just go ahead and begin by doing like a little analysis. So for example, if you were to stand in a parallel position and you took a step back and you had a lot of rotation out with your right foot, then there's two indications here. Yeah, my foot turned out, but why? Maybe it could be because I have a tight hip flexor, and it also could be a tight calf. So if you notice, and we're just going to kind of, touch on a couple of these things, if indeed I'm stepping back and I'm rotating out, so in other words, if I were going to go into yoga and do, for example, a warrior one or a warrior two, something like that, and my foot is primarily turned out, I'm not going to have a reaction on the calf. But if I really want to affect lengthening my calf, then I'm going to have all 10 toes facing forward in the sagittal plane. So once all 10 toes are facing forward, do that right now and notice what you feel. And as you start to lean forward a little bit, you're going to say, I feel my calf lengthening, but how could I actually affect my calf even more? Well, this is where your hands as drivers come into effect. So as you start to reach forward and as you come back, I'll give you a side view. So again, as I start to reach forward, I'm going to feel a reaction in my calf. But if I were to turn my foot out and continue to reach, I'm not going to feel anything happen. So again, if my reaction is really wanting to get my calf and my hamstring, I've got to decide what body position is going to be the best to make that happen, right? So same thing, as you're reaching forward, you're going to feel that whole posterior line lengthen. But if you reach to the ceiling, just by reaching to the ceiling, there's a chain reaction on this hip. So again, if I'm turning out, I got a tight hip, I got a tight calf, then my range of motion might be limited depending on what's going on. So if I reach forward and I pause here for a moment and come back and start to make it dynamic. So essentially what's happening here, as you're bending that front knee and as you're coming back, you're creating this thing called dynamic dorsiflexion in your right ankle. So if I was one of those people that wore high heel shoes all the time, then my dorsiflexion is going to be very compromised because I'm living in plantar flexion, or I'm taking all those bar classes, being on my toes for 45 minutes. Again, the more I shorten down an area of the body, I'm going to start having dysfunction somewhere else. So again, if I'm tight in my hip and I'm tight in my calf, my knee is right in the middle, nowhere to go and nowhere to hide. So again, we might look at the fact that if I've got tight hips, and especially it's creating more of a valgus knee for me, then I'm going to be a little bit worried about the fact that I'm starting to wear and tear down the lateral compartment of my knee. So again, had I known all this, years ago, then I could have really saved myself from having a knee replacement on my left side. But years of doing crunches, let's work our hip flexors until, we're in agonizing pain, led me to a joint replacement. And my goal is, as part of the whole ageless philosophy, is the greater your mobility, the greater your stability and flexibility, it all is encompassed, right? But yet the way we train sometimes is just not very smart. We're still doing it. So let's just talk about, again, take a step back now with your other foot. So again, we're still in that sagittal plane. And so if my goal again was to lengthen my calf, I'd reach forward and I'm going to feel that reaction. But if I start to hinge, so I'm not, this knee is bent. So yes, my hamstring's being affected, not a lot though, because the knee's not straight, but the knee is bent as I hinge forward, I am going to start to feel a lengthening in this hamstring and this whole posterior line. Still the calf is being affected, but because I'm now reaching below the knee versus in front of me or versus above, then those reactions become different. So this little excerpt today is just to really think about kind of my hips and my knees. And we'll be doing a lot more ageless flexibility and giving you some great ideas. But for right now, once again, just take a step back. Notice what you do, not right or wrong, but then try to have all 10 toes facing forward. Feel the difference versus an externally rotated hip and or foot. Again, we have a tendency to sit all day long, et cetera, et cetera. We get tight hip flexors, we get in a forward flex position. So the more that we become tight here and posteriorly, we start to have this effect of more of a flex position in our upper thoracic spine because we've lost the mobility of our hips. So again, this is ageless flexibility and how to think about lengthening the calf and the hip in the sagittal plane. More to come in the frontal and the transverse plane.